Yep. Hi, everybody. Most of you know who I am. Okay, I'm John Lennon anyway. And if you don't like the talk, please don't throw pizza, which I just cleaned. Energy Saving Home Makeovers by John Lennon with Microsoft PowerPoint. It's my first use of PowerPoint in 20 years, so nothing will go wrong, I'm sure. All right. Energy Saving Home Makeovers, what is that about? Well, what I'm going to talk about is what I call a personal approach to making a normal home into a low energy one. There's plenty of literature around on how to reduce your energy use, how to be green, etc., etc. Most of it these days seems to involve buying some high-tech product or other, or a combination of high-tech products. The approach I'm going to show you is one that predates the current way of doing things. I want to show you there's more than one way of doing it. Things I've got to do to get a talking slot. Okay, this is my home. I bought it just over 18 months ago. And it's a 1930s bungalow in Truro, 2 bedrooms plus a fairly ropey attic conversion. It's got a good sized garden, which is why I bought it. I didn't give much thought at the time to what the building was or what I was going to do with it. But when we moved in, we put the heating on. It's got gas heating, fairly modern condenser boiler. I thought that would be okay. Unfortunately, when we first fired the heating up, not much happened. Well, the boiler fired up, the meter spun round and round, and the radiators got hot, but the house didn't really warm up. Something had to be done. It wasn't the first time I'd been in that position. About 15 years ago, I bought and done up a big old farmhouse in Normandy in France. It's supposed to be on this next slide. I'm going to whiz by the picture of the French farmhouse very quickly. Okay, you all got that? I was previewing the slides earlier on, and I'm not quite sure what happened. It's genuine. Just imagine a big French farmhouse. This is the inside of it. What I'm doing is, see if the pointer works, so I'm lining the walls with 400 millimeters, that's, what's that, about that much, glass fibre. Okay, there's an inner wall that I've built in front of the outer one. The outer one was just wattle and daub. I noticed the thick window returns that I built there. And there's similar going on in the attic. There's 200 mil of insulation in the attic space. Again, there's an inner skin that I built to hold the insulation in position, and plasterboards that I put on top of that. Behind the insulation, you can just see some silvery stuff. That was a product that was new at the time. It's just a thermal sealant and a general reflective wrap. Adds a little bit to the insulation. Why did I do that? It's a very high level of insulation, as anyone who knows about R values will instantly spot. It's because of this. My ambition was to have a wood-fired Rayburn heating 4,000 square feet of farmhouse. To give you an idea, that Rayburn at full blast knocks out 15 kilowatts of heat. A condenser boiler of average size and average UK home is 25 kilowatts. So I was very underpowered on the project. Was the house warm? It got warm. Probably wasn't the warmest building in the world. I learned a lot about how to insulate. I learned a lot about how to match boiler size up to house size. And I'd also learned about some of the mistakes you can make. So when we went on to the next project, my home as it is at the moment, that earlier photograph was taken 18 months ago. I've done things differently, hopefully a little bit unusual. The house Mark II, the home in Truro, looks a little odd. Looks a bit like a Swiss chalet. It's warm, it's dry, it doesn't cost much to heat. I'm looking at heating bills now going forwards that would make Scrooge impressed. The work isn't finished yet. You see, it's got slightly thicker walls. Let me go back. Windows set in the outside, walls much thicker, like the ones in the French farmhouse. Okay, what's going on? I will explain what I've done with the house in a little bit more detail. What I want to do is give some historical background into the whole sort of thing about insulation, where it comes from, where the various ideas and theories pull together. I'm going to take you back into the 1970s. All right? Because I was born in the mid-60s. I grew up in the early 70s. When I was at primary school, there was war in the Middle East, war which caused chaos in the world oil markets. The effects were twofold. Firstly, the world economy imploded. And when I say implode, I'm talking inflation at 20% and rising, mass unemployment around the world. Secondly, we had energy shortages. The two crises were interlinked. The rising prices caused by the oil shock caused social unrest and strikes here in the UK. This, combined with the lack of oil for power stations, meant there was a period of several months when the lights actually went out. Aren't I sweet? No, that's not me. But it is. I remember days like this. I remember my parents tuning in the radio. The BBC would tell you when your area was going off. They rotated the blackouts around the country so that everyone could share the pain. At one stage, we were even given ration coupons for petrol. There we go. People working by candlelight. In the United States, they actually did run out of petrol. And they introduced quite draconian petrol rationing across America. As the wreckage of the 1970s unfolded, it became obvious to a lot of policymakers that the world had changed. It was summarized by US President Jimmy Carter. In April 1977, he gave a televised speech. The fuzzy shot is from that televised speech. It was later called Carter's Moral Principle of War speech. It unrolled a plan for what was going to become a new era of energy conservation. Now, Carter's plan is one of the most interesting documents of that era. A lot of these measures got kicked into the long grass by later administrations, but one of the goals, and it's one I've ringed in red, is interesting. To insulate 90% of American homes and all new buildings. 90% of homes. That was 40 years ago. Imagine what the world now would be like if our governments had stayed on Carter's war footing over energy. The era started well. That was the British government's attempt. These are some innovative houses of the era. This particular one was built by a guy called Steve Beyer. He founded a company called Zoneworks. Zoneworks is still going, and they pioneered a lot of the early work in building design. This building is built, I think, in Arizona. The fold-down flaps, and they are fold down, they're reflective. They reflect the sun's heat into the glass at the front of the building. Behind the glass are water tanks. Water is a very good storage medium for energy. When the sun sets, they fold up the panels. The water tanks release their heat into the building. Early experiments at ecological building. And here's another one, a sun trap, basically. These are the sort of things that were going on in the early 1980s. These early attempts may look laughable now, but they were potentially the beginning of something quite interesting. Once again, we have to ask ourselves, where would we all be now if these building experiments had continued? So where are we now? Well, the truth is, since the 1980s, most of the real innovations in building design have taken place outside of the Anglo-American world. The reasons for our failure are different, depending on which side of the Atlantic you are. Basically, American energy policy got bogged down in politics. In Britain, we found North Sea oil. But elsewhere, development continued. Let's take a look. Bang up to date. This is a design of home that most of you will have heard the name of. It's called a passive house. It's a German design. The idea behind a passive house is very simple. It's a home that has little or no heat loss and needs little or no heating. I first read about these back in the mid-1990s, and right away I wanted to build one. Needless to say, I'm still waiting. Warning. Okay. So why is it so difficult to build a self-heating home in Britain? Well, the main reason we are still stuck in the 1980s. Here's what I think is one of the main culprits: cavity walls. The picture on the left is a cross-section through the wall of a typical UK new build home. Okay. This is a standard cavity wall. Inside the cavity is PIR insulation board, approximately 50 millimeters, a standard size, and a window shown in section. Take a look at the red arrows. These are thermal bridges. A thermal bridge is simply a connection between a warm and a cold surface. Heat will flow through certain materials like concrete, like electricity through a wire. It can flow quite long distances. As you can see, there is a thermal bridge across the wall plate at the top, through the window lintel, down through the window returns, the size of the window, through the window sill. There is a thermal bridge through the metal wall ties, one every 18 inches that hold the two halves of the wall together, and there's a thermal bridge where the base of the wall meets the floor. By the time you're done with these areas of heat loss, you are lucky if the walls in your brand new British UK built home has 50% of the insulation value that your builder tells you you have. There's another problem with this wall. Take a look at the illustration on the right. This illustrates a conveyor belt of air called a thermal loop. A thermal loop flows around your insulation inside the wall, and it renders your nice £500,000 new home about as well insulated as Fred Flintstone's cave. Thermal loops have to be stopped. And do you know how builders in the UK stop a thermal loop? I actually have the stuff here. Sticky tape. It's aluminized tape. It's what you will see on building sites across the land, used to fasten the several bits of insulation together and seal it against the walls. Now, what I'm going to ask you, if anyone wants to have a play with the tape, Craig, is how long do you think that tape will last inside the cold and damp cavity of a Cornish home? How long do you think, guys? 10 years? 20 years? 100 years? Bear in mind that the house I did up in France was 350 years old. Think about it. So this brings me to my final point about cavity walls. No matter how good they are, no matter how good the insulation, no matter how modern materials, if you can't get at the insulation, get inside the wall to repair or replace it, that wall is doomed. Insulation materials have a finite life. They will need replacing well before the house itself does. If you put it in the wall, you can't get at it. So what's the solution? Well, the answer is, of course, as we know, lots and lots of research on the internet. Here's the sort of thing you can find. This is a typical design for a passive house. It has the insulation on the inside and the wall on the outside. Notice the wall is solid. They don't mess around with cavity walls when you're talking passive homes. There is a huge thickness of insulation. A passive house may have between 200 and 300 mil of fiberglass insulation on the inside. To compare that with British building regs, your requirement in the UK is for 100 mil of fiberglass insulation in between the cavity, in between the interstices of the wall. So we're talking up to 3 times British building regs, and a solid wall without a gap, without thermal loops, without thermal bridges. Notice the position of the window. It is set into the wall. The exterior wall is cold. The insulation on the inside is warm. There are no thermal bridges around this window. Remember, thermal bridge will bridge the inside to the outside. Let's have a look at another one. Now here is an Australian passive house. It might as well be an American one. The building design is the same. Here they don't have stone or brick or anything else like that. It's just a damn great thickness of insulation. Again, you're talking 200 to 300 mil, and plywood over wooden frame, a semi-permeable membrane to keep the weather out, and weatherboarding on the outside. This is a fine wall. Again, as with the German passive house, if the insulation deteriorates, here you just pull the plasterboard and repair it. Here you undo the weatherboarding, replace the insulation, put the weatherboarding back. That may happen several times during the estimated lifespan of the house. So, how do you apply these techniques to a UK home? Here we begin the work on my home. And this photograph was taken about 14 months ago. I began in the attic, fairly conventional insulation. The silver foil I'm using in the attic to, as much as anything, to seal the edges. I wanted this attic to be airtight. On top of the silver foil, unrolled insulation. The silver foil is sealing up the old insulation. There's 100 mil of insulation below it. I put 300 mil on top. That makes 400 mil of insulation in the attic. Again, if anyone's insulated their attic, you'll know that's a lot of insulation. Yeah. Okay, and because there's an attic conversion, it's all over the shop. Here I'm using PIR board, 100 mil of PIR board on the vertical surfaces, and then great piles of insulation. There's the famous tape. I'm using that on the PIR board. These boards are internal to the attic board. They are accessible. Everything here can be replaced. Okay, here's where we get creative. There's one small section of the house that had a cavity wall. I don't like cavity walls, but if you have a whole load of bean bags, which I happen to know are the same material that they will fill your cavity walls in if you get the builders in, you lift up the windowsill, you fill the cavity with bean bags, you put back with bean bag beads, you put back the windowsill, then at the top of the cavity wall in the attic, you fill that full of bean bag beads, okay, and you can insulate a wall very cheaply that way. Right, front porch. Replaced the roof. I placed triple layer glazing, fitted it myself, and this is extruded polystyrene on the interior wall of the porch. It's an unheated sun porch. I'm not trying to keep the house warm doing this. I'm collecting sunlight. This room will heat up during the daytime. The warmth will be retained in it to a certain extent by the extruded polystyrene, and then it'll release its heat to the house during the evening. This is the outside of the porch, 100 mil of fiberglass insulation. This is, you remember the American design of home, this is a damp-proof membrane. It's a bit like Gore-Tex. You can buy it in builders merchants. It comes under various brand names, but basically it will let water vapor out but keep moisture from penetrating into the wall. On the outside, weatherboarding. That was the front porch. Now, the house itself, this does not have cavity walls. The only cavity wall was the one at the front I showed you. It's a construction of this pot block, which is a solid block with a little space up the middle. It can be an air channel in the middle, but it's not a cavity. For all intents and purposes, a pot block wall is a solid wall. And here I am beginning the work. Along the bottom here, I've put a line of blocks, okay, little bits of slab. And you see I'm just laying a board along them. What am I doing? The board is then fastened to the wall periodically. Builder's foam in, a little moulding along the front edge and the top, enable it to set, chopped off. That is going to keep the insulation away from the floor. I can also, if the foam starts to deteriorate, I can get at it from the outside, I can rake it out, I can refoam it, I can repair the wall from the underneath that way. What goes on next? 100 mil of high density fiberglass. I really kept myself awake at night wishing that I could put 200 mil in. There simply wasn't the room, but this gives me a very good insulation value. It brings it up to and exceeds modern building regs in terms of insulation. So that's unrolled against the wall, the semi-permeable membrane, battens to hold it. The battens go from the board along the bottom up to the joist and the eaves. You'll see that in a moment. Air brick, it's a much needed source of ventilation for the underfloor, but again I've lined it with insulated material. Inside the pot blocks there are internal cavities which have access to the air brick space. I've blocked them up from the inside. The devil's always in detail with these ones. And then I'm putting weatherboarding on. You notice this whole design is starting to look very American. It is. Weatherboarding going up. Layers of insulation going up. Now, here's where the magic starts, because the thermal bridges, remember the thermal bridges. I got this from an Irish website, people retrofitting their Irish homes into passive homes. There's a very strident builder there who detailed his technique for dealing with the windows. Now, this window used to sit in the slot there. Okay, I've moved it out. It is not in contact with the wall. This next slide is a shot of this is the window, okay? That's the old wall, and this is insulation, okay? The exterior insulation, this is the outside, former outside of the home. The window is only in contact with insulation. Okay, so that window frame will get cold when the cold air hits it. It's touching insulation. It is not touching the internal brick wall. There are no thermal bridges here. Okay. The wall has been bought. Just flip back to that one. The old wall is now entirely inside the insulated part of the house. Moving on, the devil is always in the detail. If you move the walls out, you've got to move your drains. And you've again got to refit all your guttering, all your bits and pieces, a little bit of trim and stuff like that. Takes a while. And then you make good, of course, the window returns with good old plasterboard. This is nearly done, plasterboard. It gives the house these sort of characteristically thick farmhouse-like windows. The missus said, lovely, I like the big sill, we can put plants and things on it. Great, box ticked. And then we start to look at other walls in the house. Now this is a shot of what was our bedroom. It's opened out onto a patio. There's a big door, the door never shut properly, the draft's coming in through it, and there's a window beside the door. I don't need all that glass in my bedroom. So it gets bricked up. There's the odd window come out. Doors come out. That is all the window I need in a bedroom. Look at these two big areas of heat loss that have been completely eliminated. There's an air brick I put in there. Looks like that when you're done. Okay. It's bedroom, bathroom. So, what's the result? I've done about half the work so far. I've done 3/4 of the exterior walls, externally insulated to 100 mil. The non-converted areas of the loft have been insulated to 400 mil. I've filled the front cavities. I've also partly done under the floors. Getting underneath floors is a bit of a bugger. I've done about 25% of that. That will be done in the fullness of time. The effect so far is a little bit intangible, but the house is much warmer already. It's a house that stays warm. Unless it's a very cold night, we run the heating on today. We put the heating on in the evening, it ticks away, house becomes warm quickly, turn it off when we go to bed. Next morning we get up, I'm shuffling around in my t-shirt, the house stays warm. Okay. What have I saved? This is a back of the envelope calculation. At the moment, I'd say there's approximately 1/3 off the heating bills. It's difficult to say because I started insulating the loft from day one, so I haven't got a 12-month to 12-month comparison, but that's roughly what I've saved so far. Job's half done. Okay, done so far. What's the target? Finish insulating the exterior, reline the converted portion of attic, that's a bit I haven't mentioned, finish the underfloor insulation, insulated window coverings and shutters. There is literature from the 1980s again, that wonderful period when they were really thinking about things. Movable insulation is the standard work on the subject. It's got absolutely everything about the construction of proper thermal blinds, insulated shutters, all that kind of thing. I think I might go for the shutters. The house will look a bit bizarre, but it does already. Target saving 60 to 80% heating energy use reduction. Target price 2,000, something like that, possibly 3 by the time we've done everything. It's a fraction of what it would have cost to have a new home built to this standard. Thank you. I have worked 2.5 weeks taken off work, the holiday times, and every damn evening since, basically. I go back, I do a little bit each day. Yeah.
What do you think the cost is, John, for the payout?
So far, it's materials only, £1,500 approximately, and I'll probably spend another grand by the time I'm done. So, I mean, the materials I've used are deliberately the cheapest. Notice I'm using fiberglass. It's a lot cheaper than PIR board. I know PIR board has got the R value and so on, but at the end of the day, insulation's got to pay for itself. Looking at what you get for your money, and that was the best. The weatherboarding again was the cheapest way of doing it. I got that from the local farm supply shop. Okay.
How did you make the windows secure as in home security terms, if you're mounting direct to insulation?
They are held in with a very thin strip of, well, it's 4mm plywood, which I didn't actually see in the photographs, just to stop the insulation from falling out, basically. Glue and builder's foam, really. I mean, a window is only as secure as someone hasn't thought about putting a brick through it, basically. Yeah. I mean, smash it in, open it. So, yeah. I haven't been robbed yet.
Perfect. Thanks again, John, and thanks for stepping in last minute a couple of days ago to put us in slot.
It's all right.
Put that together very quick for us.
Oh, which one of you felons has got my tape? I'll see you after.